Hi and welcome. I'm Mich Bondesio and this is Creating Cadence, a podcast for life and work in motion. This podcast is about what it really takes to work well and live well in this fast-paced world we live in. I'm the author of The Cadence Effect, and I also write over on Substack. The focus of my work is on reimagining work and business as part of building more regenerative, sustainable systems. This podcast is for high-performing founders and teams, creatively minded entrepreneurs, and purpose-driven business owners who want to make a more meaningful impact without sacrificing themselves or their people to burnout, hustle, or overwork. This is the final episode of Season 15, published on the 12th of June 2026. And today's episode is a very special edition for two reasons. Firstly, on the 14th of June 2020, almost 6 years ago to the day, I nervously pressed publish on my very first episode. And the second reason for celebration is because this is episode 100. Can't believe I'm saying that. Given that most podcasts don't make it past 20 episodes, this is a major milestone for me. I'm super proud and excited to have reached the 100 episode mark. So today we're going to do something different, in that I'm doing a review and a recap of how this podcast has evolved over the past 6 years, and I'll also share some lessons learned. Whether you're listening on your commute, on a walk, or in between tasks, thanks for tuning in. Let's begin. Before I dive in, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something. If this is your very first episode of Creating Cadence that you're listening to, welcome. I'm genuinely glad that you're here. Episode 100 is a good place to get a sense of what the show is about, who it's for, and the kinds of conversations that we have. And if something resonates, there's a deep back catalogue waiting for you. Over 6 years of episodes covering everything from burnout and leadership resilience to creativity, regenerative business, and what it really means to work in a way that's sustainable for the long haul. So welcome, and I hope you stick around. And for those of you who've been here for a while or for the whole time, some of you for years, this one is especially for you. More on that in a moment. The Creating Cadence podcast was born in a time of turbulence, in that it started during the first months of the pandemic. And in many ways it has grown up in the middle of turbulence too, navigating the escalating polycrises we face of environmental, socio-economic and geopolitical challenges that we're all collectively attempting to find our way through. In some ways, this podcast has been my way of making sense of my world and of the positive changes that I wanted to try and contribute to in it. Because when everything outside feels uncertain, building something steady and meaningful of your own, something that grounds you and connects you to others, matters more than ever. So the podcast started as the most practical of decisions. You see, I hate doing video, and I wanted to find another way to reach people, and we were all stuck at home anyway. I genuinely had no idea who might want to listen. Back then, I didn't expect to gain a reach of much further than the next county along from Lancashire. So you can imagine my absolute delight at discovering that as of January 2025, my audience regularly spanned 30 or more countries. A stat that I've been cheerfully dropping into every conversation since, because I've been so chuffed about that number. But then last week, in preparation for this episode, I went back and double-checked my overall stats for the past 6 months. And I was completely stopped in my tracks. Over the last 6 months, the first 6 months of 2026 that is, that listenership number has grown to a whopping 60 countries. Holy cow, people! Thank you so much. Seeing that number last week literally brought me to tears. I can't believe that's 60 countries. Now, I want to be honest with you. By the standards of the big, mega successful podcast shows, my audience numbers are still considered small. And that's okay. It was never my intention to create something big and flashy. The podcast is just one part of my portfolio of work. Not the thing, but one thing. It's essentially a passion project first and foremost. But I'd like to think it's also a genuine public service offering too. It's my way to help people in a way that's accessible. But what moves me isn't actually the numbers, it's the geography. It's the fact that people aren't just listening in from my birthplace of South Africa or my home here in the UK. There are people tuning in from Argentina and Belgium, Finland and Kyrgyzstan, Paraguay and Portugal, Tanzania and Taiwan, Suriname, Switzerland, Venezuela, and the US, places I may never get the chance to visit, where someone on a morning commute or an evening walk or while cooking dinner has chosen to spend a bit of their time with me and with these ideas. That is not something I take lightly, And I want to say, if you're one of these people, you're going to make me cry wherever in the world you're listening from. Thank you so much. I also know from the lovely messages that I've received over the years that for some of you who have stuck with me over the long term, you've done so through your own challenges and difficult seasons. Things like forced career changes, burnout recoveries, periods of real uncertainty about what comes next. And for some, something in these conversations became a turning point, something that encouraged you to think differently about how you work and prompted you to start making more positive, purposeful change. You've brought me into your lives and your work, and you've let me into your headphones during the hard bits. I'm honored to have been given that space with you, especially right now when we're all so bombarded by noise and information, that choosing what deserves your attention is in itself an act of both intentionality and rebellion. So genuinely and deeply, thank you, my listeners. You absolutely rock. I also want to acknowledge that this journey hasn't been mine alone. Over the past 6 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing 42 brilliant guests, innovators, thinkers, founders, creatives, and changemakers who were generous enough to share their knowledge, their experience, and their honest reflections on how to work and live better. There are too many to name individually without this turning into a very long roll call, but every single one of them has contributed something valuable to this living archive. And you can find out more about these lovely guests if you visit their specific episode pages on my website at creatingcadence.co/podcast. So this celebration is theirs too, because reaching 100 episodes isn't just a personal milestone alone. It's also a community achievement. These conversations have created a collective body of insight that has had a real and cumulative impact on an international audience. And in my book, that's something we should all be darn proud of. 6 years ago, I had no idea that this is where we'd end up. I just knew that I hated video and I wanted to try something new while we were all sheltering in place. What followed, I couldn't have predicted. This body of work has led me to build 3 online courses and ultimately to write my book, The Cadence Effect. And those endeavors opened doors I'd never anticipated, including being invited to become an entrepreneur in residence at the University of Lancashire, which has given me the opportunity to share these ideas with entirely new audiences. From small and humble beginnings, big and meaningful things can grow, if you're willing to show up consistently, with courage, curiosity, and cadence. That, I think, is the most important and truest lesson of all that I've learned on this journey. Now, for the rest of this episode, I want to take a look at how this podcast has evolved, the themes that have emerged across the years, and then finish by sharing some of what I've personally learned along the way so far. Although the podcast has transformed over the years in terms of format and topics, moving between interviews and educational monologues regularly, there has always been a focus around one central question. How do we build lives, businesses, and ways of working that are genuinely meaningful, have a healthy rhythm to them, and are still sustainable? That question has been the North Star from the very beginning, even when everything else was shifting. The early seasons emerged during the pandemic and centered around helping people navigate disruption, uncertainty, and rapidly changing working practices. From there, I expanded beyond personal productivity into broader conversations around creativity, technology, innovation, and the future of work. Increasingly, I also found myself exploring intentional productivity through a relational and cultural lens. And then I had a realization that the idea of intentional productivity was actually closely and intimately aligned with something bigger, regenerative working practices. At that point, the focus shifted to incorporate sustainability, resilience, and well-being and regenerative business thinking. Looking back across all of the conversations, episodes, and seasons, 6 core themes have emerged, and what strikes me most is that they are as relevant today as they were when they first appeared. In some cases, they are more urgent now than ever. The first theme is reimagining success and sustainable leadership. This is where we explored leadership resilience, conscious capitalism, regenerative business, and what it really means to build a purpose-driven, values-led business. It's a theme that perhaps most directly challenges the version of success that most of us were handed, the one that equates worth with output and growth at any cost, and asks what a better version might look like. The second thread running through every season is intentional productivity, human energy, and the link between productivity and well-being. This is the heart of the show in many ways, burnout prevention, rhythmic working, building individual and organizational resilience, flow states and flourishing, and sustainable performance. The idea that how we work, the design of our days, our rhythms, our recovery, is not a soft peripheral concern, but it's central to everything when it comes to how we work. The third theme is creativity, identity, and meaningful work. From authenticity, storytelling, and self-expression, to visibility and the question of how we embed our personalities and our values into the work that we do and the brands that we build. This one feels personal every time because it gets at something that matters deeply to me, that the work that we do should actually feel like ours. The fourth is building better work cultures and communities. This covers collaboration systems, team culture, community building and belonging, human-centered leadership, flexible working, and what it genuinely takes to create healthier work environments, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us and the teams we lead. The fifth theme is technology, innovation, and the future of work. I dived into exploring emerging technologies and our human relationship with technology, looking at things like Web3, AI, and the impact of an evolving digital landscape. Interestingly, many of these conversations happened just before AI truly exploded onto the scene. But listening back now, they feel remarkably relevant still. Questions that we asked then are still ones that everyone is grappling with today. And the sixth theme, which is an increasingly important and urgent strand, is nature, systems, and regenerative thinking. This is about connecting the dots between ethical business, environmental thinking, systems awareness, sustainability, and our deep interconnectedness with nature and the wider environment. This theme has grown in relevance with every season, and I expect it will continue to do so. So as you can see, these themes are both wide-ranging, but also deeply interconnected. A bit like cadence itself, really. You don't create cadence in just one area of your life. The philosophy is woven across all facets of it. And if you'd like a proper exploration of what I mean by cadence, including how it connects to everything we've covered this season, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to episode 99, our penultimate episode. I want to end today by sharing some of what I've personally learned from this experience of building a podcast from scratch, because honestly, it's been one of the most unexpectedly formative things I've ever done. The most important thing I've come to know, in my bones, not just in my head, is that I can do hard things. And as Marie Forleo wisely says, everything is figure-outable. When I started this podcast, I knew almost nothing about audio production. Everything you hear, the hosting, the recording, the editing, the mastering, the marketing, I taught myself. If you go back to my earliest episodes, you'll hear the difference quite clearly. But that's not embarrassing. I've learned to accept that that's evidence of 6 years of learning and mastering a craft. I've learned from people willing to mentor me, from YouTube rabbit holes at midnight, from podcasts about podcasting, and from studying the shows that resonated with me, trying to understand what made them work well. And slowly, sometimes painfully, I got better at doing it. And I'm still learning. More than the technical skills, though, the podcast has transformed how I communicate. I've learned to speak better, to moderate my thinking in real time, to hold space in a conversation while still guiding it somewhere meaningful. And those skills I've developed and honed don't stay in the recording booth. They show up in my coaching work, my consulting, my writing, my workshops, and anywhere that I'm dealing with people. Here's something I don't often say aloud, but it feels right to share with you today. You probably don't know this, but I am at heart an incredibly shy person, and I'm occasionally socially awkward. I know it might not seem that way, but I'm someone who finds putting herself out there genuinely uncomfortable. So the confidence that podcasting has helped me build has been no small thing. It has been career-defining. As I mentioned earlier, I'm still learning, of course. Every season brings new software to try, new formats to experiment with, new voices to learn from, and I intend to keep it that way. That curiosity is part of creating cadence. I've also always been quite particular, perhaps stubbornly so, about who I invite onto the show. It needs to be the right fit for the topics and for the values of the podcast, and the topics change every season. I've also been even more particular about sponsorship, which is why, for the most part, I've chosen not to take it on. Too often the principles don't align. That said, I did get to collaborate with Magic Mind across 2 seasons, and that was a genuinely lovely experience, proof that the right kind of alignment is possible. But as I mentioned at the beginning, this has always been a passion project, a public service offering, and I've resisted the pull towards clickbait titles and aggressive marketing because that was never what this was for. I've always wanted to grow Creating Cadence slowly, organically, and intentionally. and to see what emerges when I do. If I was starting from scratch again and doing one thing differently, it would be this. I would have been braver sooner about reaching out to the people I most wanted to have on the show. In the early days, I was absolutely terrified of asking. What I discovered every time was that people are far more delighted to be invited than you expect, and that giving other people a platform to share their ideas so that we can all learn and feel a little more connected has been one of the most unexpected joys of this whole endeavor. And so that's it for season 15. 100 episodes, 6 years, 60 countries, 42 brilliant guests, countless cups of tea, late nights in the edit, and moments of wondering whether any of this was reaching anyone at all. It was, it is, and I'm so glad that I kept going. So every year the podcast takes a pause over the summer as part of a broader digital content sabbatical that I take at this time of year for rest and recharge, and for creating the kind of space where new ideas can properly percolate. Call it a repair week at scale if you like, because that's essentially what it is. This pause is a deliberate recovery season. It's the Cadence philosophy in action, and I do it every year, not despite what this podcast stands for, but because of it. So we'll be back later in the year, and in the meantime, there's a rich and ever-growing back catalogue of episodes to explore, all of it evergreen, all of it created with you in mind. Thank you for being here, truly, and I hope that you also get to take a seasonal break soon. I'm sure you've earned one too. As always, thanks for listening, and a few quick things before you go. If you found this episode helpful, please like or rate the podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps others to find us. You'll find out more about my work at creatingcadence.co, and you can grab a copy of my book via thecadenceeffect.com. You can also read more of my articles at creatingcadence.substack.com. The Creating Cadence podcast is produced by Bondesio Media, is hosted on Acast, and is available on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and YouTube. It's edited on Descript, and this season's music is from Changing Their Minds on Premium Beat. So until next time, keep moving forwards with courage, curiosity, and cadence. Bye for now.